Welcome back to another chilling episode. There's something about a rainy night, isn't there? The way the darkness seems to press in closer. The way every unexpected sound is amplified by the drumming of water against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. It's on nights like these that the veil between our world and something else feels thinnest. The ordinary becomes menacing, and shadows dance with a life of their own, playing tricks on the mind or perhaps revealing truths we'd rather not face. Tonight, we dive into 3 very scary, true horror stories that happened on rainy nights. These aren't just campfire tales. These are experiences that have left indelible marks on those who lived through them. Accounts of encounters that defy easy explanation and tap into our deepest primal fears. The relentless downpour in each story isn't just a backdrop. It's an active participant, isolating the victims, heightening their senses and washing away any sense of security they might have once felt, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. So find a comfortable spot, somewhere warm and dry perhaps, but don't get too comfortable. Turn off the lights if you dare, grab a blanket, pull it close and let the sound of the rain outside, or the imagined sound if your night is clear, transport you. Let's get started and immerse ourselves in the terror that only a dark and stormy night can truly conjure. Our first story takes place in a remote cabin, where a group of friends encountered something truly terrifying on a stormy night. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway for Sarah and her 3 friends, Mark, Emily and Ben. They'd rented an old rustic cabin deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. The forecast had predicted clear skies, but as evening approached, the clouds rolled in, thick and ominous. Soon a torrential downpour began, accompanied by flashes of lightning that illuminated the dense, dripping trees surrounding them, making the woods feel like a closing fist. The cabin itself was old, the kind with creaking floorboards and a faint, musty smell that hinted at decades of untold stories. They tried to make the best of it, starting a fire in the stone hearth, playing cards and sharing stories. But the storm outside was relentless, the wind howling like a tortured animal, rattling the window panes with a ferocity that made conversation difficult. It was Mark who first noticed something amiss. He was facing the largest window, the one that looked out onto the darkest part of the woods, when he swore he saw a pale face looking in just for a second, illuminated by a flash of lightning. He tried to brush it off, blaming the flickering firelight and the disorienting storm. But an unease had settled over the group. Emily mentioned hearing a faint scratching sound coming from the attic, right above their living room. Ben, ever the skeptic, suggested it was just a raccoon or a squirrel seeking shelter from the storm. But the scratching wasn't sporadic like an animal's. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate, like fingernails dragging slowly across old wood. The power, which had been flickering, suddenly went out, plunging them into near-total darkness, save for the dying embers in the fireplace. Panic began to set in. Sarah fumbled for her phone, its flashlight cutting a weak beam through the oppressive darkness. As she swept the light across the room, it briefly caught something in the corner, a tall, slender shadow that seemed to sway, an entity that hadn't been there moments before. It was too tall, too still to be one of them. Before anyone could scream, a deafening crash of thunder shook the cabin and the shadow was gone. But the scratching from the attic intensified, now accompanied by a low, guttural moan that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. They huddled together, fear a cold knot in their stomachs. The rain hammered down, each drop a tiny fist against the roof. The moaning grew louder, closer, as if whatever was in the attic was now moving, descending. They could hear heavy, dragging footsteps from the staircase that led down from the attic, a staircase they hadn't even noticed in their earlier exploration. They knew with a certainty that chilled them to the bone that they were not alone in that cabin, and whatever shared the space with them was not welcoming their presence on this terrifying stormy night. In our second story, a lone driver picks up a mysterious hitchhiker during a downpour, only to realize they might not be human. David was driving late, a sales trip that had run longer than expected. The highway was a ribbon of wet asphalt disappearing into a black, rain-lashed night. Visibility was terrible, the wipers struggling to keep the windshield clear against the deluge. He was tired, a little on edge from the treacherous driving conditions, and still had another 100 miles to go. It was in a particularly desolate stretch, miles from any sign of civilization, that his headlights picked out a figure by the side of the road. It was a woman, drenched and forlorn, her thumb out. David wasn't usually one to pick up hitchhikers, especially at night, but the severity of the storm made him hesitate. She looked so miserable, and the thought of leaving anyone out in this weather felt cruel. He pulled over, the car door groaning open against the wind. She slipped in quickly, bringing a gust of cold, damp air with her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I thought I was going to be out here all night." He couldn't see her face clearly. She kept her head down, long, dark hair plastered to her skin. They drove in silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the drumming rain. David tried to make small talk, asking where she was headed, but her answers were vague, monosyllabic. An unsettling feeling began to creep over him. There was something off about her stillness, the way she barely seemed to breathe. He glanced over. Her clothes were soaked, yet the seat beneath her remained inexplicably dry. A strange faint scent like damp earth and something else, something decaying, began to fill the car. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe the seat material was water-resistant. Maybe his fatigue was making him paranoid. But the feeling of dread intensified. He risked another glance. This time, he saw her hand resting on her lap. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, and her fingernails were long and disturbingly dark, almost black. He felt a cold shiver trace its way down his spine. He focused on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, suddenly desperate to reach the next town, any sign of light and life. When he dared to look again, a few minutes later, after steeling his nerves, the passenger seat was empty. She was gone. He hadn't stopped the car. He hadn't heard the door open or close, which would have been impossible not to notice with the wind and rain. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pulled over abruptly, his breath catching in his throat, scanning the empty road behind him, then the empty seat beside him. The faint, disturbing odour still lingered, a chilling reminder of his passenger. The seat was still perfectly dry. He knew then with a sickening certainty that he had given a ride to something not of this world. Chapter 3. The Abandoned House. Our final story involves a couple who seek shelter in an abandoned house during a thunderstorm, but they soon discover they are not alone. Liam and Chloe were on a cross-country road trip, chasing adventure. One evening, as they drove through a sparsely populated area in the Midwest, a sudden, violent thunderstorm erupted. The rain came down in sheets, making driving impossible, and the lightning was striking alarmingly close. Spotting a dilapidated two-story farmhouse set back from the road, seemingly abandoned, they decided it was their only option for shelter until the storm passed. The house looked like it hadn't been lived in for decades. Windows were boarded up or broken, the paint was peeling, and the porch sagged precariously. Pushing open the warped front door, they were met with a gust of musty, stale air. Inside it was dark, and filled with decaying furniture covered in dusty sheets. Cobwebs hung like macabre decorations. Despite its eerie appearance, it was dry, a welcome respite from the raging storm outside. They found an old, relatively intact sofa in what might have once been the living room and settled down, hoping the storm would blow over quickly. As the minutes stretched on, the house seemed to come alive with sounds beyond the storm's fury. Creaks and groans echoed from the floors above, too rhythmic to be just the old structure settling. Chloe swore she heard faint whispering, like hushed voices carried on the drafts that snaked through the decaying rooms. Liam, trying to be brave, explored a little with his phone's flashlight, but the oppressive atmosphere and the feeling of being watched made him quickly retreat. The temperature inside the house also seemed to drop significantly, a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside. They were huddled together on the sofa when they heard it clearly, slow, deliberate footsteps from the hallway just outside the living room door. The footsteps paused right outside, and the doorknob, old and rusted, began to turn slowly. Liam and Chloe held their breath, hearts pounding. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing only impenetrable darkness beyond. There was no one there. But then a child's giggle, soft and chilling, echoed from the shadowy depths of the hallway, followed by the distinct sound of a small ball bouncing. Terrified, they knew they couldn't stay. The storm outside was still fierce, but it seemed less menacing than whatever lurked within the walls of that abandoned house. Scrambling to their feet, they didn't even bother with the front door, instead wrestling open a stuck window in the living room and climbing out into the rain-soaked night. They ran back to their car, not daring to look back, the image of the turning doorknob and the sound of that ghostly giggle seared into their minds. They drove away as fast as they could, the abandoned house receding into the stormy darkness, its secrets undisturbed, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls. Thank you for joining us for these spine-chilling tales. The rain has a way of washing away the mundane, revealing the unsettling possibilities that lie just beneath the surface of our reality. Whether it's an isolated cabin turning malevolent, a spectral passenger on a lonely highway, or an abandoned house that refuses to stay empty, these stories remind us that when the heavens open, sometimes more than just water comes down. The darkness and the storm can be a perfect cover for things that prefer not to be seen in the clear light of day. These accounts, sent in by viewers like you, serve as a stark reminder of the unknown that surrounds us, particularly when we're at our most vulnerable. Isolated by the elements, seeking shelter, or travelling through the desolate hours of the night. The sound of rain might forever carry a different connotation for those who lived these experiences, a soundtrack to a terror they will never forget. What unseen things wait in the shadows when the world is awash with rain and darkness? If you enjoyed this video, and if these true horror stories sent a shiver down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more true horror stories. Your support helps us bring more of these terrifying encounters to light. Share your own rainy night horror stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Stay safe, try to stay dry, and we'll see you in the next one.